Hello and welcome to the King Hero's Journey podcast. That was my son, by the way. I have yet to get the name of that piece, but he's playing it. And I'll just say before I forget, because this is part of our deal, if you could click on the link in the chat and go and sub to him, that would be awesome. That's part of our arrangement here, that he gives me this beautiful music and lets me be a proud mama. And today I'm so happy to welcome Don Lester to the King Hero's Journey podcast, where we're talking to people who are brave, who will say things that go against the grain and are not going to shake in their boots and be afraid, but move forward authentically in the world and give of the gifts that they were given. And Don, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me, Beth. I'm really pleased to be here. Yeah, it's interesting journey, as you say, with standing up and at the same time trying not to be so weird that people just switch off. So yeah, it's interesting times. Interesting times.
Indeed, I know. Yeah. It's a question of, are you around your own people? If I'll just make this message out to you. I'm sure it's not your case, but if you have too many people around you that think that you're weird and strange and there's something wrong with you, and maybe even worse, then it means you got the wrong friends. You're around the wrong people, right? So we have the right to be around people that actually appreciate and know us and sometimes even love us. I'll just say hello to a few people in the chat. Mimico Girls here from Ontario. Welcome. Earthship Bear, nice to see you. So good. We are on Rockfin Live now. That is up, and I apologize. I don't end up seeing the comments too much, so I always see them after the fact, but I appreciate them anyway. And Polly Vegas is here. You're on also on Rockfin if need be, Plan B. And you like his stuff. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'll pass that along to him. Hello, Unindoctrinated and Candace. It's been a while since I've seen you. Welcome to the stream. Glad you're here. So today we're going to talk about a really important subject, one that's been on our Canadian radar for some time now during the pandemic, after they couldn't throw enough crap at us at one time. But this came down the pike that all of a sudden we had this program called MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying. And it became pretty freaky. It also became an arena where I do believe there was a lot of unnecessary dramatization. So we're going to talk about all of the nuances around this subject. And I've got people that have walked their loved ones through to the other side with the assistance of this program in Canada, and they have nothing but good things to say about it, actually. That's just anecdotal from one or two people, but compared to, say, what was coming down through the media channels at us, saying that, like a 12-year-old who was depressed could go and get medically assisted dying. I do not believe that's true. Good. I'm glad to see you're shaking your head there. Yeah. Come on. Right. We got to start seeing the forest for the trees here. And so, Don, you've written an excellent article. It's what inspired me to do this interview now. I had it on my radar, but no one in particular. And there you were, like a good researcher and author that you are. For those that are not familiar with Don, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her now. As a researcher and writer, she's co-author of What Really Makes You Ill, a book that became incredibly popular over the pandemic, pointing to some what was, to me, absolutely brand new thoughts about contagion and all of the things that we think make us sick, but what's really there. I learned early on how the word, we're not going to go into that subject today, but I learned early on just looking up the word virus. I think it's safe enough to say that on these channels, and reading how in reality it means poison. And then it's like, oh, it's the great poisoning. Perfect. Right. Now I get it. And it's coming at us from all angles. So she also published Why Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease Is Wrong in 2019, as well as 2 books published in 2010 under the pen name NOR. Her current work is focused on deepening her understanding of the meaning of life, as well as learning how to integrate the knowledge that we are all aspects of the divine with living our lives as free and unique individuals. She's also developing new ways to share her understanding and with other men and women so we can create the beautiful world we know is possible. And again, Dawn writes her articles on Substack. So I'm going to drop a link into the chat so it's clickable. And you can go and subscribe to her articles there. And yeah, Candace has given some props to your book. And that's great. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this conversation because also it's another one of my favorite subjects is death and dying. Not a lot of people will go, oh yeah, that's my favorite subject. But it is the most important one, nearly of all of the subjects. So we'll talk about all of the nuances around medically assisted dying and then death and dying itself. And before the stream, Dawn and I were talking about the possibility of her doing a workshop in the House of Free Will on mindfulness and the importance of how we see things. I'll get you to flesh that out and we'll make an announcement to the members coming soon up, of which you are one. Happy to have you there. I just did a snippet today.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, just did a snippet today on the topic of willingness. And we've been doing satsang Sundays, which have been absolutely beautiful, just going right to the heart of all of the subjects that we have. So once again, Dawn, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you for inviting. I'm really pleased to be here too. As you say, it's an important topic, and it's also a very sensitive one. So I'm going to say at the outset, I'm not trying to say that people don't have health problems. I'm not trying to say that anybody should do anything or not do anything. It's merely that my concerns about the way the medical system functions, it doesn't provide people with all the information they need to be able to make a truly informed decision, because that's really what this is about. And as you say, in the context of death, it's not a topic that is talked about. There's all sorts of taboos about talking about it. It's hiding. It's fear-based as well. A lot of it is the fear because of not knowing what happens, that kind of thing. And again, the medical system is set up to avoid it, if you like. So it's as you say, so many nuances. I'm not sure how deeply we'll go into happy to talk about the topic of death. It is taboo for many people. So yeah, it probably is something that should be talked about more widely, and for the fear to be removed about it.
Exactly. It was what I noticed in going through the, we'll start off with the institutionalized dying that we're talking about here, but just quickly how when my parents were passing away within a couple of years each other, and we were in that system, the death and dying system, for luckily not really long time. Those things can go on and on, but you right away get a picture of how incredibly unnatural and awkward and weird and like the normalization of it, which is it's pretty normal, but from the medical perspective is a very strange kind of what feels to be compassionless. Anyway, there's so much that people get hung up on around that. But let's dive in with what this actually is, maybe some of the history. How did it come about? Is it really brand new, or was it all around? And it just is something that, like, here's what I noticed, that they're actually promoting it, right? Making little children's books about it, like it's all okay. So where would you like to jump in and get started with this?
Okay, in terms of the history, that's actually really interesting. I found a website. This is subsequent to the article, and I think I may end up writing a second one, because the more I found and to expand on the topic. But I found a website called World Federation Right to Die Societies. And again, I'm just taking it from the website, so I haven't checked these facts, but that they seem to be pretty much how the information I found from somewhere else. The earliest act was in 1871 in Germany, where they allowed assisted suicide under certain conditions, but euthanasia is strictly forbidden. So probably before I get too much further into that, it's to it's to explain the difference. There's assisted suicide, which in Canada is sometimes called self-administered medical assistance in dying. And the other one is euthanasia, which actually is from the Greek for good death. So, yeah.
Interesting.
And that's a clinician administered medical assistance in dying. That's for Canada, and we'll come on to why we're going to go into more detail in Canada, I'm sure, along the way. So in the 1900s, so in the 20th century, there were 2 countries and 1 US state that actually put some legislation with respect to assisted dying. And then it changed from 2000 onwards. There were a few countries and a couple of American states between 2001 and 2009. So that was 5. So in 10 years, there were 5 new, well, as I say, US states and other countries are just 5. And from 2016 onwards, it's really ramped up, and starting with Canada in 2016, although in 2013, for some reason I've got the dates, Vermont, USA, they brought that in, medical aid in dying. But in Canada, that was when it was first brought in. It has changed since. So it started with assisted suicide and euthanasia under certain conditions and done by a physician are allowed. Now, things have changed since then. So as I say, we'll go through that. But so that was Canada, in Vermont, another couple, 2 more American states in 2016, then another USA state, District of Columbia, in 2017, along with 2 states, Australia, Victoria state. Then in 2019, there were 3 US states and another area of the Australia. So that's another 4 in 2019, another New Zealand in 2020, and then a whole load more in 2021. And according to that website, it's not updated beyond 2022, so another 2 countries in 2022. I don't know if that's up to date. I thought there had been some more in sort of, so it's definitely something that has ramped up in the past 8 years, and so it's definitely something that is being encouraged, should we say. Now there are slight differences, mainly in the US. Medical aid in dying is allowed under certain conditions, so that's their their version of MAID, MAID. Some other countries have slightly different wording. So assisted suicide and euthanasia or medical aid in dying. So they say slight difference in terminology, but the main difference is that as I say, the euthanasia is, the definition according to the Government of Canada website is a physician or nurse practitioner directly administers a substance that causes death, such as an injection of a drug. And the other one is assisted suicide. A physician or nurse practitioner provides or prescribes a drug that the eligible person takes themselves in order to bring about their own death. Now, somebody else said that assisted dying is something different, but I think they're the 2 main things. So either there is a physician who assists the process, or who gives the person something that they take for themselves. Now, in England at the moment, which is what started the process of me looking into it, and the incentive to write the article, is that on the 29th of November they brought in a bill to introduce, it's just in the early stages, so they think it'll be a couple of years before anything actually happens, before it comes into law, so it'll go through various stages. But at the moment in England, and that bill is for England and Wales, there's a separate one for Scotland, a separate one for Ireland. But at the moment, the situation in England, and this is why I'm sort of bringing the situation in Canada and sort of for the contrast, is in England at the moment, under English law, and again, we can talk about law sort of, separately, but that's where things are at the moment. Euthanasia and assisted suicide are both illegal. And it's really interesting that, so assisted suicide, so if somebody takes their own life, apparently it says trying to kill yourself is not a criminal act. But if you help somebody to do that, it's punishable by up to 14 years imprisonment. So I've heard that's because it's legal in Switzerland, for example, and there's the organisation Dignitas, that if somebody takes themselves there to, to end their life, that's fine. But if somebody goes with them, that person, when they return to England, could be imprisoned for 14 years because they have assisted somebody in that process. I mean, I don't know how they'd find out, but that's the potential. And with respect to euthanasia, it's regarded as manslaughter or murder. And I know I didn't put it in my article because it only came to mind within the last day or two, is that when people are on a life support machine and the decision is made to turn that machine off, that's technically euthanasia, really, isn't it? So it's, where is it okay? Because it's regarded as either manslaughter or murder, but apparently it's not in some cases. So it's that was just something that came to me. Well, how does that work? Because it is, according to English law, they're illegal. They're against the law, and there are punishments. So I thought that was rather interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, go on.
If you want to go on with any more history, I can leave my questions or just jump in.
Well, as I say, I was with the history. I haven't gone into the history in a huge amount of detail, but I've just listed the dates and the different countries, and it's amazing. Really, Australia, America, Canada, a few European countries. Oh, and one of the articles I found in 2013 talks about Japan, and I'll just read this section. I hope you don't mind me reading from my notes. It's just
No, of course.
so many details, I can't hold them. It says, according to Japan's penal code, solicitation of suicide, the act of intentionally killing oneself, assistance in suicide, commissioned murder, and consensual homicide are illegal. So in Japan, actually killing yourself is not allowed. No laws or official guidelines govern voluntary assisted dying. So, but again, they have a very strong code against taking your own life, ending your own life, helping somebody end their life. So, these are different worldviews in different parts of the world, different countries. So, but I just think it's really interesting that they're pushing out. Or they have been over the last 8 years, and I have to wonder what's behind it. Somebody, a friend of mine, made one suggestion. I hope it's okay to sort of share it here, that looking at what's been going on for the last few years, we know these plans and agendas are set out some years in advance before they're actually rolled out. And it seems that they obviously knew that there was going to be a large number of people who would be affected by the vaccines. Are we okay with that here? Okay,
No.
good. No, okay.
Yeah, just say using the euphemism.
Yes,
jab.
okay. Yeah, with the shots. Okay. So yeah, the medical procedures, yes, those, so they would be, they knew there would be a lot of health issues as a result.
Mm-hmm.
And so there will be more people who have chronic health issues. They knew that was going to increase. That's one aspect. Another aspect, I did start looking at or contemplating the funding issue, the funding side of these things, of where the money's going. Yes, I'll tread very carefully.
That's okay.
I'll tiptoe. so with the funding, again, in England, because of the NHS system, everyone's used to, they think, oh, it's, free healthcare. Of course it's not, we pay in other ways. So they're used to having whatever the health issues and then going to see the doctor. And there's, for a number of years now, they're saying that the NHS is in trouble, can't afford everything that they're doing. Of course, that we know these systems can find money for other adventures in other parts of the world when they need to, but looking after their own people somehow, is difficult with the funding. There's also the issue of looking after people, so palliative care, whether the money should be put into palliative care instead of helping people just exit. So there are a lot of aspects to this, and of course there are problems with the whole palliative care, because as the research that I've done over the many years that ended up going into what really makes you ill, the medical system has a flawed idea about how the body works, what health is, what disease is, and what they actually know about people's health conditions. So in terms of the English bill at the moment, the bill in England and Wales, there is, quite strict conditions at the moment, and the person has to be regarded as terminally ill, and the prognosis is around 6 months, so they're not expected to last much longer than 6 months. So they have to be terminal and they have to have that diagnosis. So that's where they are at the moment, and they say there are plenty of safeguards, I'm going to, again, inverted commas, within that to protect people's rights and to safeguard against potential abuses, and that's another aspect of this to obviously to go into. Now, that the reason that I went more into Canada, apart from the fact that that's relevant for you, but that was the starting point, I think, for Canada. But that has changed more recently in the past few years. I think it was in 2021 they changed it. But it does, in Canada, they don't have to have what's called a terminal illness. What the conditions are, it says the person has to be considered as having a grievous and irremediable medical condition, and that there are certain criteria that must be fulfilled. So to have a serious illness, disease, or disability, and this is another point to possibly come on to, be in an advanced state of decline that cannot be reversed. And of course, you and I probably both had experience of being in a situation that may have been considered that couldn't be reversed, and yet here we are. So, and this is really the impetus for me to want to look into it and write the article, because of what is regarded as a serious condition that nothing can be done about. Oh, sorry, there's nothing more we can do for you. That's a flaw within the medical system. That's not their lack of knowledge. Well, it's their lack of knowledge, but it's not because they understand the conditions. They don't understand these conditions. And I'm careful around that particular words. So I'm avoiding that one. So that particular condition that is still so very fear-based, and yet it's misunderstood.
The C word? Is that what?
C word.
The C word. Okay, yeah.
That's the one. Yes.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, if you don't get the code, let us know. We can fill in the blank in the chat. But so it's based on a number of really subjective things that are in reality in the hands of life itself, or God, or whatever word you want to use for that, right? That somebody, even the diagnosis of terminal illness, that this is headed for death. Well, you just don't know. And I immediately got an image of how in the Bible, and there's Moses is led his people, and they get to the sea, and it's all is over, and the enemy's coming, and it's over, and it looks terminal. And then what does God do with the grace? Is part the sea, right? And so yes, it's a very big metaphor, and maybe a little bit wild for people to take on, but we've all had moments like that where grace appeared out of nowhere and something happened, whether it was to, make sure you didn't get hit by that bus, or you made it through the illness, and you got the information or resources or insight or awakening that you needed to turn that corner. And it becomes a very is it just the place, another place where we give over our power and our free will to the spellers that are creating those diagnoses of whether you're palliative? These are all very specific designations in the medical world. There's nothing that is, there's no thesaurus and just, we just use one of those words, right? They have specific definitions, and they very much are related to the law, because that is exactly I'll say the big subject is, or one of the big subjects is liability, right, for somebody's life. And that's what they're always protecting against, things that they do in the medical system around birth and death, always to make sure somebody can't come back and go like, you did it. You were the one, you killed grandma, you ended somebody's life too soon, or whatever the situation is. So it's pretty, I don't know. It's pretty yucky. What I notice is that when you put yourself in the hands of the medical system, that you do fall under their spell to a great degree. And the amount of energy that it takes to override and think for yourself and stand up for your rights is, it becomes very difficult inside their arena. But when it comes to death itself, then this is something that I think is, what is it? What does it ultimately serve? Is it a, um, just on the outset, the part of the depopulation agenda that actually I really like your whether it was your friends or your conclusion on the whole thing, is that they knew a lot more people were going to be getting sick. And that's good for controllers at some level, because it consumes a great deal of healthcare and drugs and all of the resources that go into, trying to stop somebody from being alive, or taking care of them while they're palliative, which can go on and on and on. Right. I used to sing in palliative cares in hospitals before or since I had done my own treatments and came out the other side, and people had been there for years, right? You don't know. Is it going to be a couple of weeks, a couple of years? It's totally in God's hands. So, it's just interesting to see what's the angle. Is the system tanking so badly, and they're looking for all the ways to cut the corners, and make sure those are shorter stays in palliative care? Or are they thriving on all of that? It's got some big mixed messages in there.
Yes, and I don't think it's any one thing. It's probably a whole mix, and some of them seem to run counter to what we think of as the agenda, which is just big pharma making lots of profits. But of course, if people are being helped out, so they're no longer customers, then big pharma aren't going to be making the money. So, well, that doesn't make sense. But again, it's a question of which aspect of the agenda is more important at some point. I mean, they're always going to be making money, because as people are exiting, there are more people coming in, and it's not just about older people. Although, from what I've seen, the assisted dying legislation is about adults, so 18 years and older. So again, it's not at the moment. And again, at the moment, who knows what else can come down the sort of, in years to come. But at the moment, it doesn't include children. It is only adults. And again, it's the consent, informed consent, having the information, having the ability to actually make that decision. It, and again, so some other aspects, people have been saying, oh, well, if people are ill, that's part of their life's journey, that's part of their life lesson. And I'm not disagreeing. At the same time, if people are deferring to the medical system, they are not really making their own choices. They're being led astray into something that is not necessarily helping them. Now, that's just, again, so nuanced, as you say, leaving it in the hands of the divine. But it isn't. I don't think the medical system is. No, from what I've learned, the medical system is not as helpful as it is believed to be, which is possibly putting it mildly. The other aspect is, with bringing in AI, people are not needed for so many aspects of life. Things can be done by AI and automatically, so the fewer people are needed for employment. So there is that. And something else in this country that they're doing is continually increasing the age of retirement. It used to be 60 for women and 65 for men, but that's changed recently, and it just keeps going up. And that's partly because they're not sure they can afford to pay all the pensioners. I mean, that's again, that's just the whole funding. That's the story they tell us. Oh, well, we're not going to have enough money, so and it is to keep more people in work, and then so worn out that they don't have much retirement before they're then shunted off the other side, because they're then got some kind of chronic condition that means, oh, well, we can't afford to look after you with palliative care, and suggesting maybe they might want to go this route. Also, there are older people who are don't want to be burdens to their family, that there's that consideration, which is it's very altruistic. At the same time, you go, well, that's not your decision. They're to choose to leave because you don't want to be burdened on someone else. I mean, you don't have to be, but again, it's the standard system, the medical establishment system, that gives us the idea that we just fall apart as we get older, and that just simply is not the case. There are plenty of examples of people in their 90s leading very active lives, and at the same time there are young people who have very serious chronic health problems. So it isn't a fit and healthy young, and then you get to middle age, and then you start to fall apart as you get older. That just isn't how life is, and that is, that's not how the body works. It can fall apart if it's not looked after, and that's the point of getting the information out to say we can look after ourselves, and the pharmaceutical model is not the helpful way that we are told it is. That's being tactful and
Yes.
being very and underestimating the situation. I mean, it's pretty awful. So I mean, there, as I say, so many parts to this. So I know I've thrown a lot at you, but it's just because there are so many parts. So I'm not saying, oh, anything is right or wrong. I'm just saying there's a lot of information that is not out there in the public domain. So I think it's the more information we can get out to help people see what's going on. And it's not just, oh, they're saying that, therefore they're wrong. Well, I don't know. Maybe there are situations in which it's appropriate. I know some people exist in extreme pain, and that's not much of a life. It's awful. But living on painkillers isn't necessarily the answer, because there's more than just the physical chemical body. There's more to us, and that's why the part of my sort of emphasis is on the power of the mind, and how we can be influenced negatively and take on those ideas that then manifest in our body in terms of illness and health problems. which is a lot of what's in my article. So
Right. I was just going to pick up on the point about the inevitable decay of our health. And I remember my grandparents aging and watching them, and it was a constant decline. And that was in the face of a lot of medications, especially on one side. I think it was more than 30 or could have been 50 medications at one time. And I remember my grandma saying, you know what? I'm good. I've lived my life. Things have been good. I am going to stop taking this medication. And if it's the death of me, then so be it. So she stopped taking all of those medications and nothing happened. I'm sure something happened. Like there would have obviously been some changes. And sometimes those can actually be really dangerous to quickly come off. But she just stopped taking everything. And there she was. She lived another, I don't know, 18 years or something after that, right? And so it was a really good thing. And I can't help but point to the work of Dr. Garrett Smith, who I've had on a few times. I don't know if you had a chance to catch any of my interviews with him.
no.
You must, Don. You've got the mind for it. You are open, and you're a good researcher, and you're deep in the health rabbit hole. So let me share a few things with you after. But this decay of the health, you're right, is not natural. It is a product of the toxicity. That's nothing new to anybody. We all know that. And I can see for myself just in a short time of having got on a pretty straight path with this, more so than I've ever been in my entire life, even though I survived cancer, even though I've been through major things. Even last year went through a total breakdown of my digestion, which is what brought me to this point of continuing. Like I recovered, but let's get this right. What's going on here? And I honestly, in my place that I'm at right now, I feel better than I have my entire life. Right at 56, I'm not declining. Now that's not over the hill or anything like that, but that's, I was thinking back to my parents, and I can see in other family members that more normal course of aging that's taking place. But that is not our natural. That's not what God wills for us. Let's just say that isn't the case. Now, even healthy people die, so that's it's not about avoiding dying. And I think that's where we are so hooked into the medical systems, right? Because we have that internal drive to survive, but that's really called fear. It's really toxic, right? There's the physical material toxicity, and then there's the mental, emotional, spiritual toxicity with which that is on. So these play at that in and pull the deepest strings in us. And then people don't want to look or feel or see or really investigate when it comes to that deeper inner spiritual, emotional stuff. And so what do? We hand over to institutions and legislators and, to do all of the thinking for us, as if it's just a thought process anyway. And then we end up in this mess of definitions and legalities and liabilities and all kinds of things that we just completely bypass the real subject. If we could maybe talk about suicide as a whole, because medically assisted dying, of course, they don't use the word suicide because this is something that has been deemed to be illegal. Is it immoral, unethical? I don't know. I guess it's pretty hard to pin anything on that, but at least illegal. And so, how do you think that came to be in the world that taking your own life was considered like against society?
Well, um,
Throw a winger at you there.
yes, I, I don't know if it's something that's in, say, the more indigenous cultures, if that's something that they would even consider. No, that's why I read out, the situation in Japan. It's not a Western. I mean, it's more westernized now, but within their culture, it's not something that they would consider. So I don't think taking one's own life is natural. There must be something fairly strong to be able to want to do that. Now, that's where we can sort of dive into the area that's called mental illness, and so people
But could
who
I jump in and just
yes,
respond
yeah,
that
sure,
taking your life is not natural? Well, one of the things I studied in anthropology was in some traditional cultures that the elderly would decide when it's time to die, and they would stop eating. Right? That's one thing I noticed about
right,
around dying people is, oh, they're still eating. She's not dying. She's still eating. She's still
right.
she's still building a body. And so they would decide, okay, I've lived my life here. I have you know, I'm not, now I don't want to put this on, but like, I'm not contributing anymore. I don't have anything useful to offer anymore. And I'm going to make this decision that my life is over, that it's been lived.
Yes, yes, that I don't regard that as suicide. As you say, in an older person, and as you were mentioning before, when you were saying things before, it was the thought came into my mind. There are some people who just say, "Yeah, it's my time," and they don't wake up. They go to sleep and they don't wake up. It's a choice. It seems that it is possible to have that choice of saying, yeah, I'm ready, to say, yeah, I'm, and allow yourself to go. Now, to me, that doesn't fall under the heading of suicide as such, because
Right.
nobody's
Yeah, just
actually doing anything. You're
right.
not doing anything to stop life. You're just allowing yourself to transition to whatever the next phase is. There's people who've looked at people when they're in the last phase, and there's something that seems to shift, and it's like almost a lightning, and they look more cheerful, and then they pass. So there's a recognition, if you like, of moving on, transitioning, whatever terminology people like to use. So it's that they're ready to leave here. They feel like they've done whatever they need. As you say, this, I'm happy with what I've done here. I feel fulfilled. It's not that people can't contribute more. It's just, they feel fulfilled in what they've done, and they're ready to move on.
Right, got it. Yeah, I also got some advice from the chat that it might be the S word from here on if we discuss.
Oh,
Yep,
S word.
we can't
Okay.
say anything anymore, right, Dawn? It's
All
just
right.
crazy. But this is a very important distinction what you're making right
Mm.
here, because the taking of your own life in misery and in suffering and in hopelessness and not having resources and not being supported and all of the kind of things is very, very different from this end of life choice. Now I'll throw another nuance at you with regard to this. Say the chronic drinker that spends 40 or 50 years um, making sure the liver doesn't work and that it will eventually fail under that load of the toxicity. Well, this is a long, slow S, right? This is, and it's not made out of that freedom that life has been good and I'm ready to
Oh,
move on,
true,
right?
true.
It's coming from the same thing that would have you just cut your wrist or take too much medication or whatever. But yet we don't recognize this at all, and there's a big policy that you don't turn away the heroin user over the pregnant woman who's um, yeah, I don't want to put pregnant women in the hospital anymore. Actually, forget that
Mm.
metaphor. But the person who fell and had an accident and broke their leg, that they're not going to prioritize this person who had a genuine accident over the person who is actively, slowly trying to end their life.
Uh, and again, that's nuanced as well, because some people are addicted to certain things, not necessarily for from their own, on their own volition, because they're introduced to something at a stage where they're um, impressionable, maybe, and it becomes a habit, and they then form that addiction. It's not that they have made a conscious choice to do that. They're sort of drawn into it, and And again, we can go into the whole societal problem of, what kind of society, societies are we living in where people are treated that way, people are abandoned, they're, to get to that stage where they feel so helpless, where life feels so meaningless for them. So this is, it's not, deciding what to do with them afterwards when they're at that state, because that's just the band-aid. It's looking at what's underneath and resolving those underlying problems, the basic problems, and then that doesn't occur. So it's looking at where we are in the way, if you like, society works, which is where a lot of us are saying, these systems don't work, they're not serving us, so we need to find different ways so that we can function cooperatively, we can look after each other, we are more compassionate towards each other, and if people are struggling, we will help them. We won't just label them and throw drugs in them of whatever sort, just to or allow them to do that because they feel helpless. It's to helping. It's not just handing out money so they can do something. It's to really help them properly by having a different type of society, if you like. I mean, maybe society is the wrong word. It's, the community. So people are working together. People will know each other and recognize something that's going on. Look at things just very, very differently. And that requires taking responsibility, people taking responsibility, and that means everyone takes responsibility. And that's the opposite, as you were saying. It's just, oh well, we just defer to these experts and authorities. They'll just look after us. So it keeps people in much more of a childlike or childish state. They don't really get to properly grow up because they're not encouraged to. It's part of how the system likes, oh, they're their children, will look after you. And that control is just getting tighter, and that's where we're getting squeezed and saying, oh, hang on, no. That's what the last 5 years has been about, really, to get people to see how much they're being squeezed and say, is this what you really want? And a lot of people are saying, no, it's not. So we have to look at different ways. So it's, I say that as you said, sort of the title for this, there are nuances. There are many nuances, and yes, certainly in England, it's the nanny state, because that's it. Kind of, well, they'll look after us, and I think to a certain extent there's similar kind of ideas in Canada and Australia, because again, colonies from England, where I think in the US there's it's not quite the same thing. It's not quite. I mean, some states maybe, but not everywhere in the States. So it's not completely worldwide yet. So there are pockets of us who are really bringing up different ideas about how to live. And that's what this is all about, learning to find different ways of living so that we can look after ourselves first.
Yeah.
Which is something that we're not taught. So this is the start. Actually, look after yourself first, and then know how to look after other people.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was some of those comments as well. Yes, I mean, it's recognizing we aren't anybody else's property. We own ourselves, and to recognize that and take responsibility in all areas of our life. But because of the last 5 years, the health field is one that's really been the key. It's the wedge, the beginning wedge. So when it's helped people see things somewhat differently, because they just don't accept what's being pushed out. Not that there were ever mandates, but it was suggested that they were, certain things were mandated and they had to do certain things if they wanted to do X, Y, Z. So yes. And again, I'm not, yes, there are people who make these choices, and I'm not saying people shouldn't. I know it's a different circumstance. People are in whatever the circumstances are, It's just I feel that there's some missing information about these diagnoses and prognoses. That's my concern, that people aren't given the information, like you're saying, about certain conditions that are deemed terminal, and in fact they're not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that we haven't imbibed responsibility for life and for our community and for our parents. And it's no little thing, right? It is. There was a time where we didn't actually have good palliative care, and it wasn't that long ago either in Canada, where the dying were not looked after with a now it's kind of a red carpet service, and they got their act together, and I think they got enough messages from people that it wasn't a dignified death, that people were discarded and families were unable. Now it kind of went the other way. There was in my parents never did make it to palliative because of the quickness of their deaths. But my sister had to intubate my father. She's a nurse, so she could do it. She had the skill. But that's kind of like a sign of, oh, this is weird. Imagine if that my sister didn't have that skill, and how that night would have gone when he was on his deathbed. And so yeah, this one of the things that it brings to mind, just is to highlight it. Maybe it goes without saying, but there's conscious choice versus unconscious choice. And so for the vast majority of people, they are making their choices without a conscious awareness of the motive for the choice, what's behind the choice. And that's why I'm a broken record about programming, because if more people were able to see inside themselves where their choices and decisions are coming from, then they could get clean with that, and they could see where is this the true nature of life and dying, and where is this a disnature of life and dying. Because we have the impressions, like you said, that there's been many effort to make these impressions on us, but we're the ones that actually run those programs and have the choice over them. So this can be a very empowering place to go. I was just going to bring up as a quick aside that say in India, I don't know if they've ever approached the concept of assisted dying, but they won't even euthanize an animal. They won't put an animal out of their misery, how we talk about that oh, they're suffering, put a bullet in their head. And I'm not arguing for this. It's really just a big open question. But they say that the timing of death is so specifically chosen between that soul and God or life, the force of life, and that you never interfere with that. You never interfere, right? So possibly this is maybe why S became such a taboo. We can't even say the whole word here without getting censored. And so that there's something interesting there. And when my mom's cat was getting very sick and looking like she was on her deathbed, well, guess what? She looked like that a bunch of times and recovered. And I remember the night that my friend was telling me, Beth, just go to the vet, put her down. She'll be out of her misery. She'll thank you for that. And I looked at her and I said, is this what you want? And I would always be talking, just tell me, give me some sign that this is what your soul is wanting. I never got the sign. And I could tell she was appreciating that there was something that her time was precious, like her timing. And I didn't know when it was going to happen. It just happened to be in the middle of the night, and she was in bed with me, and she dragged herself over to be closer to me. And then she took her last breaths, and it was done. And, to this day, I have a very strong inner experience about that, it's intense. That's intense. I still sleep in the bed that my cat died in. And, so it has a lot of meaning for us, and a lot of charge and all that kind of thing that most people don't want to face. We don't want to face our own suffering. So when it comes to facing somebody else's suffering, death seems like the solution to that. But if one thing me going through my near-death experience taught me is that we don't get out of this, right? So you could put an end to the suffering, like, my hand hurts, so I'm going to cut it off. Yeah, the hand doesn't hurt anymore, right? But there is a continuum that we're in here.
Yes, I mean, there's so much in that. Your experience with the cat, I mean, so many people would be put off as like, oh, the cat died. It's like, oh, they cringe from that because there's something, they have a different perspective rather than, oh, it was such a beautiful experience. She chose her time. And again, another suggestion of people getting used to putting their animals down to get them, to stop the suffering is, maybe that's part of that has been to get people used to the idea of then, well, we can put people out of their suffering because that's the point about the suffering.
Right.
And yes, I mean, I know I keep harping on about the informed consent, but the again, this is the situation in Canada that they I'm going to read this. It says, informed consent is when you give permission to receive medical assistance in dying after you receive all of the information you need to make your decision. This includes your medical diagnosis. And that's where my issue lies, because I know that people aren't getting the full extent, but when they're given that part of the information that the medical system that's all that they know, so that's the information they're imparting, even though they don't really know, but that's what they've guessed, that's their best estimate of whatever the condition is, and it's usually the C word, not always, but certain conditions are considered terminal, and it's that. And that's where the nocebo, the placebo nocebo effect comes in, because then people take that on. And then because there is so much about this condition that people think, oh, it's like a death sentence, that's the whole idea around it. That's the whole fear mongering around it. And so they go into fear, and they can then manifest worsening symptoms, a worsening condition, a worsening of their health, simply because of the beliefs and the fears and the mindset they have around this conditioning, around this condition, and it is conditioning. And as you say, the whole idea about death, that it's, oh well, suffering, yes, pain and suffering, it's not inevitable, it's not necessary, but it's sometimes the side effects of what they're given to alleviate, and say, well, this is all we can give you. Now this is related, because one of the things I decided was, well, I wanted to look, well, what do they actually give people in these in this situation who have elected, who've chosen to go down this route of the dying, choosing to die, and I'll come to that in a moment, but we know that the drugs, being careful here, the drugs that people are given for these conditions are toxic. They're known to be toxic. It's just they're given the right dose to
not kill them.
Yes, the right dose to destroy the disease and not kill them. Now, this is where the problem lies, because there is no condition that they're they're not destroying something in your body that's bad, we kill that part and the rest of you is all right. Well, because the body's all interconnected, that condition has arisen for a reason. And again, we were talking about like life lessons. Sometimes the body is manifesting symptoms, producing certain conditions to teach us something about ourselves, something that we can learn about ourselves. So that it's not that we get a disease, it's that the body is manifesting, because the body's always looking towards improved health. The body isn't attacking itself. So it's always looking to restore health. So it's always creative, it's not destructive. So if there are symptoms, it's the body saying that there's something that needs to be looked at. So whether it's, you know, to do with diet, what you're exposed to, and quite often it can be connected to emotions, thoughts, ideas, beliefs, things that happened in earlier in life that we're holding on to, the emotional charge is still attached to that event, and or we've not released the stress, the anger, the distress, and it's suppressed and held in. And you know that it's like a pressure cooker, that at some point, you know, the body can only take so much of that stress before it starts causing damage, you know, because there are different things that happen in the body.
Yeah.
And it's recognizing what's going on in your body and saying, okay, there's something I need to do.
Exactly. And that's what most of the treatments out there that now this is apart from the death and dying process, but they always get results. They couldn't be a multi-bazillion dollar industry if they didn't get some results. But what they get is the short-term result. And this I'm learning so much about now in Garrett Smith's work, how you can get, say with a drug like IV, if we keep going with the letter system here, that you know, so many of us, I'll say, were waving the goodness of this drug, this pharmaceutical, this, you know, it's like it was such a contradiction in my mind, just because it's a drug, so then I'm not going to use that. But they would get those results because why? They shut down the body's ability to naturally, right, you're saying even the big C is not your enemy, it's your solution. It's your solution. The sickness is your body's solution to the sickness. So you come along with some substance and you shut it down, maybe exactly parallel to the assisted dying, and you shut down that moment of suffering, and you feel better, and you're like, oh, because we're all addicted to feeling good. Right? Who doesn't want that? That can be, I mean, that's a tricky question too, can be two sides of that. And so then I wanted to look at this comment just before we go too far past it, from M, that she said her sister who chose maids, I'm very sorry for your loss, M, but that she had an ideation with S, and when she was young, and then when she had the terminal illness, she got her wish at 66. So that's very interesting to me, because there's two sides of death programming. Actually, there's more than two sides. It's also quite nuanced, could be 365 degrees, but two main positions. One is the fear of dying, and they're trying to prevent that at all cost. And the other side of the exact same program at the signature vibration level is the desire to die. They are the same. So that's why in a conversation about maids and assisted dying, we have to talk about S, right? Because those two things, that our wrestling match with death also includes the wanting to die. And you know, there isn't a day barely that goes by that somebody doesn't tell me, oh, I'm not afraid to die. And then they will find this, the reason being because they want that. Right. And especially in a life that has been set up with so many versions of suffering from every possible angle, and even the most normal birth and the normal life is still full of suffering, maybe somewhere by design or not. That you know, we would have uh, some people would say we would have no reason to do any work on ourselves to go free if we didn't have some pain, some suffering, some motivation to do that. It's highly likely, because I notice every time I feel good, I don't really feel like going into the trenches to find my death programming. But you know, that's where those nuances can be just really informative. And thank you, Nonconformist Creative Journey. I love your name, by the way. So yeah, anything to add on that?
Um, yes, so much. The like I was saying, in with the way, you know, society, or you know, communities, whatever, are set up, some people maybe struggle more than they possibly need to, and it can just feel so daunting. It's just too hard to bear. And that's when the ideas to say, no, this is too much, I want out. And it's hard to know how to help somebody in that situation at the same time, if they're not given access to people who are compassionate and understanding to help them get through that. Because, you know, I mean, I know it's maybe a cliche, but the only way out is through. We don't learn by avoiding life's lessons. And you know, I know I've dipped a few times over the years into places where I just wonder what it's all about, and somewhere find the resilience to dig myself out and say, okay, keep going. For whatever it is that, you know, I use, usually I look at my particular experience, you know, and say, well, I got through that, so I'm here, keep going. And
right. Exactly.
You know,
I'm going to interrupt quickly. Like, put up your hand if you're the only person on earth who never hit the end of their rope, who never came to the end of their rope. Right? That is a normal thing. It's like, oh, I can't take any more. I can't go any further. I can't keep going. But did y'all keep going? Right?
well, I mean, some people use the example of, you know, children when they, you know, well, sorry, not children, babies, you know, when if we were supposed to give up, that we'd never walk because babies would fall over, and but eventually they all get up and walk and leave it all behind them. So I'm not saying that you know, that all situations are as easy as learning to walk, but it's getting through that tough time, and it's finding ways of helping people, and especially young people, through that, without just giving them labels of, you know, ADHD, ADD, whatever the labels are. I mean, there's a whole string of them, you know, as we know in the DSM-5, probably the next one they'll have even more. Just giving them labels, and that's an excuse to medicate them. I mean, it's hard to even use the word medicate because they're not medicines and medications. So again, these are chemicals, these are drugs, which is, I mean, unless you wanted to sort of carry on a particular way, I was going to talk about I wanted to find the drugs that they actually use.
Yes, I'd be interested.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, it hadn't occurred to me. I just thought, well, you know, I wonder if there's a way of even finding out, because it might have been the sort of thing that was, you know, hidden, that they, you know, don't let us know. But I did find a 2022 paper on the website of the, you know, the NIH, you know, the name escapes me, but you know, the not PubMed, but that type of I think it was PubMed, where there was a study that had 3,500 patients, about 50-50 men and women, mean age of 74. The majority, about 70%, just over 70%, had a C diagnosis. What a surprise. And this is what I found interesting. The medications most often used were propofol. That's in most of them. The second one was midazolam. And the third one was, I could be mispronouncing it, so please excuse me, rocuronium.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, it's just, I don't know. The median time from the first injection until death was 9 minutes. So I thought, well, what are these substances? And I think a lot of people have heard of midazolam because of what's been going on in the last few years. And so I looked up the other two as well.
I don't know that one. Can you share with me what it's been?
Midazolam, it's what they were using in the care homes in England to sedate people, sedate the older
Sedative.
people. Yes, they were using them at fairly high doses. And it might have been what they were using before they intubated, before they put them on.
Yes, I know what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, we know what we're talking about here.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So because that happened, and there was certainly a lot of midazolam used at that point. I
Okay.
mean, I'd heard the name, but I hadn't really looked at what these substances are. Now, propofol is it's not like pages, it's not too much, but it's just this I found interesting. It's an intravenous anesthetic used for procedural sedation. Midazolam injection is used to produce sleepiness or drowsiness and relieve anxiety before surgery or certain procedures. Rocuronium, if that's how it's pronounced, a paramount non-depolarizing neuromuscular blocker, is utilized in clinical settings for inducing muscle relaxation during surgical procedures. In other words, all three of them are sedatives of one sort or another. So this is where the whole concept of the poison is in the dose comes in, because at the inverted commas right dose, they are sedatives, only they're obviously used at slightly higher doses that they then induce death somehow. Now, this leads me to question the use of the word medicine for these substances.
For sure, exactly. Do you think that it's a pile of caca when they were saying how I think one of that they said the drug would make you like that it's not actually a peaceful death in reality, that you would like feel like you're drowning from the inside or something like that. And then also the drug that they gave before, help us out in the chat here, you guys. What was it that they kept doing? Respirators, thank you.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. And then that one I heard was a paralysis drug. So the people they actually knew, unfortunately, what was going on, but the drug made them utterly paralyzed. And so they'd be witnessing all of this live time, what was going on. And so do you think that's just a pile of malarkey based on your research now?
Well, the point is that we can't actually know, because we can't ask the people who are given these drugs how they feel, because again, they're put into sedation. Now, at what point they say the 9 minutes until death, at what point they how they determine what death is, because we know, see, that's and it goes into another area that I want to dive deeper into, which is to do with organ harvesting.
Yes.
Now,
Oh, that's gory.
if they want to harvest organs, I'm going to be careful here. It's required that the person is not actually dead.
Alive. Exactly. Because we can't make use of the dead ones. They don't.
Because they're dead. No, they need to be harvested when the person's alive. And so this is brought into question. I mean, this is not new. Other people have talked about it, but as I say, this is something I wanted to look further into, is that the concept of brain death doesn't necessarily mean actual death. People are determined to be brain dead, but what that actually means. So again, this particular article that says, the time from median time from the first injection until death. I mean, what is the point at which they're saying, death? Is it when there's no longer a heartbeat, or are they somebody who's decided to donate organs, in which case they won't be? Because I heard somewhere that there was a case of somebody who was deemed brain dead but wasn't actually, and they were starting to operate to harvest the organs, and he came back, which is just horrendous. So this is what I mean, there are so many aspects. Now, I'm not saying everyone in the medical system is knows about this, is doing this. It's not that. It's to do with what they are told, the information they are given, the training they are given, and what they do with it. You know, they operate in a certain, I mean, okay, not necessarily operate, but what are they doing? It's not a healthcare system as we know, and there's a lot that's sort of moving in the direction of tightening that up, and obviously, you know, we know they're really attacking people who are not you know, sort of suitably qualified, and just calling them quacks and pseudoscience, just anything that's not the system. And of course they're tightening the system to say it's, you know, drug based, and yet that isn't about health, and isn't about how we can live our lives. So as I say, I might do some more digging into those particular substances. I mean, but as I say, at the same time, they were used as, you know, they're regarded as medications and medicines. It's just, and at the same time, that's what's being used. It's
right.
horrible.
It's the same all along. You know, just in case you have any illusions. I was listening to a colleague last night who's launched a very big protest against a pharmaceutical company because they had a major reaction to thyroid medication. But his disposition was very disappointing because, you know, as soon as he's not well, where does he go? To the doctor. I'm not saying that you never do that or something, but what do you expect? They're going to give you something toxic, and then over time it's going to create, you know, the S ideation and all kinds of things, and massive problems and huge disillusionment. But it's like, what do you want when you put yourself in those hands? And you know, so yeah, it's the kill shot or it's the heal shot. No, it doesn't get to be both. Right.
Yes. And in terms of S ideation, the many of the substances used to so-called treat young people who have what are diagnosed as certain conditions. I mean, you know, this is well known by a lot of people now, that you know, those drugs can actually cause S ideation. You know, that can be a side effect. So these kids can actually feel worse having taken something than before, when they were, you know, anyways, it can actually, you know, it can make them feel worse and add all kinds of other problems in. I mean, in some cases, people, you know, it's been reported that there's well, I feel better. I mean, maybe less severe in their symptoms, in their anxiety, in their stress, but in many cases it's more that they're numbed out, and so they're not actually experiencing life. You know, it's somehow, and the whole idea of a chemical imbalance in the brain is totally unfounded. So, you know, to say that they're restoring that balance is completely untrue. There's no basis for that claim, and I think more and more people are aware of that. But again, it's, you know, if young children, you know, if it started early, where young children who aren't being stimulated in school and get fidgety and told they are a problem, start on this whole cycle of all kinds of drugs, and, you know, that sets them up for all sorts of problems. And of course, we know that there are always other effects that are minimized by being called side effects, and we know they're direct effects, but then they're managed by others, and then people end up, as you say, on 15, 20, 30, how, goodness knows how many medications in little sort of pill pots of when they have to take whatever they're taking during the course of the day, and then wonder why they're not experiencing life to the full.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I'm more clear than ever that toxicity actually shuts down your healing system. That's why you feel better. But it's that short-term fix. You got a bigger bomb that you're building ahead of you when some organ like your liver depends on being able to move toxins through and needs to, start unloading some of that, you're going to get way sicker because all of that is going to let up in your system. Meanwhile, you're disabling your organs from doing their job with added toxicity. And it's something that just have no illusion about it. If you take something and you feel better right away, either it's an essential nutrient that you actually need and your body's been hungry for, or it's because it's stopped the healing process. So it's a really,
Yes, because there's another toxin that's come in, and instead of continuing a particular healing process that's got you, I don't know, sort of, runny nose, headache, and those kind of those kinds of symptoms, it's like, well, we've got to stop that because we've now got to process this other toxin, so we've got to do it in a different kind of mechanism comes into play. And yes, absolutely, there's so much evidence that that's the way the body actually works, that the symptoms stop because the body is saying, okay, got to stop that healing process because now we've got to do something else. And as you say, this sort of feeling better, just taking something that stops something, it is again just the wrong approach, because even something like a headache, yes, it's it's unpleasant to have a headache, and at the same time that's your body giving you a message. So it's learning to listen to our own bodies and recognizing the message it's giving us. And I know sometimes for me a headache is this is just what my body says to me. I've just learned it, but a headache usually means I need to take a rest, just take some time out, have a rest, go and it's just a take time out.
my body's busy right now dealing with the toxins flowing through my system, and I should take a break. Exactly.
Yes,
Yep.
just step back, take some time, sometimes even just go and have a lie down for an hour, and as you say, allow the body so have an early night, that type of thing. And it's learning to listen to our own bodies, because that's the other thing, when people go to see somebody else, a doctor, they may hear what your symptoms are, but they don't know you, they don't know your body. The only person that knows that our body is ourselves. We're the ones who know our body. We live with our body the whole time. So it's time to say, okay, I'm going to start listening and learn what it's telling me, learn to understand when there's something that's something doesn't agree with me, or that kind of thing. I've recently discovered that my body really isn't very happy with coffee, so it's just okay.
Yeah, it's poison. That's why it's poison. It
Yes,
is.
yes. No, I'd really reduced it. I just had one the other day, and it was like, no, okay.
Yeah.
It's just like every now and then's okay, because I know the body can cope. But again, so I'm learning, I'm processing it, and again, it's recognizing, instead of saying, oh, I wonder what that is. No, it's that it's understanding, and then and taking the appropriate action. Sometimes it could be insufficient hydration. Sometimes literally not having enough water, can induce all kinds of symptoms like headaches, that kind of thing. So, that's why it's important to make sure, for people to, I'm not telling people what to do, but again, being suitably hydrated is really good for your body.
For sure. Yeah, it only works in a living body, which is just a tongue-in-cheek kind of a thing. One subject I wanted to bring up is about how, we've been very confused about the domains that we're working in, and this comes back to the house of free will being in the private. And to me, birth is like one of the most private things ever. That would be the last thing I would want to do in a public institution. Same with death. Now, I don't know how that's going to go, and I don't want to be arrogant and, oh, I'll never take morphine, or I'll never take, drugs, or I would never do assisted dying, or all of this kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't know what what state I'm going to be in, what choices I'm going to be making. But I did have a chance to exercise this around birth and go through, like normal but immense amounts of suffering is the wrong word, but you pain, and even the most normal birth is kind of wild. And to me, this has all ended up in the public arena. And as soon as it's in the public arena, then you are subject to legislation that changes. As you can see, like this bill's on the table. It wasn't before. Now it's going to be some new thing. And you sign off a lot of rights for once you've contracted at that level with the public, then you have certain obligations to the public. So to me, except for birth, there's nothing more private than dying. And to what degree could we take that in our own hands by looking after each other, by, as a family, coming up with some death plans that may change? Of course, decisions can be different, or even as a community, to be able to, because people talk about living together in community and growing food together in community and doing all kinds of things, but do they sit and talk about how the end might look? And you think, okay, well, I'm only 56, that's not going to happen for a long time. But you and I both have experiences we know that all of a sudden can be unlike what we planned for. And so just to plant a seed in people's minds and hearts to start having the conversation with your own children. Because I look at it, if we were able to have open, honest conversations about death and dying before my parents passed, then how many things could have been easier for us, and we would have known more about like what were their wishes and how to keep parts of their life running after they're gone. But it's just all shrouded in this until the moment that they're gone, then you can't even begin to have that conversation. So just an invitation to people to go through the discomfort of the conversations, to bring it up, and let it bring up in you all of those terrible feelings so you could let them go.
Mm.
If they don't come up, it's the same with toxicity. If you don't let it come up, then it doesn't have a means through. You already said it. The only way out is through.
Mm.
So, to what degree could we take death in the private? Now, there's all kinds of things that it's not legal to bury grandma in your backyard. It's illegal if someone were to find that out. But, how could we just do what we do? How many things do we do in the private that nobody has any say over? And how much more of the death and dying process could we privatize, which is a public word, so don't say that one.
Yes, to
Yeah.
put it in the private. Yes, I mean that's an excellent concept. It's not something I'd considered, but of course it is. As we're learning what we can do in life, and that's really one of the most important things, to know what people's wishes are for the end of their lives, and as you say, talk about it and not to live in fear. Because usually, conversations with older people say, oh, well, when I'm gone, don't talk about that, because you don't want to think of life without them. And yet it's so that's pushed that aside. And so people are uncomfortable talking about it, or to approach somebody who's older, who's like, oh, do you want to get rid of me? And it's like, no, I'd like to know so that I can help you fulfill your wishes, whatever it is. Yes, these are conversations that probably should be had, and it's very interesting to contemplate how that could be put into the private. So again, what can be done. I'm sure something must be possible to be able to set up land privately where people can be, buried without in a different way. So it's not through the system, so that people can have their wishes respected. It can be done in a way that complies with how they want things to be, and it can be, you know, a celebration of life rather than a, you know, something. I mean, it's always sad when somebody who you love leaves your life. It's just, as you say, the how we approach it now when we're alive, to so that it is somewhat different, because then you feel you've got the information, you know what the other person wants, rather than, well, I don't know, and you know, I just, yeah, very interesting. I don't know. I would imagine it must be possible with private land to create something that could be possible, but you know, it's, yeah,
Yeah. And
looking
would they,
looking.
yeah. Yeah. Would they run after you? Would they, because I was just, my imagination works like this, that say you're in a car accident and the car blows up and you're incinerated. And it's like, okay, well, then what's the difference that you would make a decision based on, obviously it's different because of the legalities and the public nature of that. But yeah, like even just using our imagination to ask these questions. And it's so much more than about that dying person, whether we're talking maid or the S word or the natural conclusion of life in the physical. It's about so much more than that one person. It affects everybody. And so I think that's why the conversation needs to be much, much bigger. And, to be the one that Em was saying in the chat, that she was raised in a weird family and death is a normal topic. But that's just not the norm. So, you know, and could you come up with that, I would say, some rebel energy to just go against the grain and say the thing. And yes, maybe somebody's going to be shocked or offended or something, but then you say it again, maybe they have a little less sensitivity this time. And never doing it to because you want people to be upset, but rather, and then to bring on the warrior energy. Come on, you guys, this is right on the heels of the rebel. Like, let's find our inner resource. Let's not always cater to everybody's and our own weaknesses. That when you come to what you think is the end of your line and you find inner resource you didn't know you have, that is a massive victory. And again, if you're here, you've always done that. You've always done that. You made it here to this moment. So you have always found the inner resource, and you will always find it. So we don't need to back out of our human experiences that are actually the door to freedom. And that is my soapbox right there.
Yes, it's talking about things that are perceived as taboo, as I was saying, and so, well, why are they taboo? And it's finding ways to approach it, and again, depending on your own family, who, the people around you, as to how you do approach it, and to make it something that is not all misery. It's to say that, there are some practicalities, and maybe that's not really what you're talking about. Just saying, this is how I feel about life. This just to express how you feel. Yes. No, I mean, it's something I say literally hadn't thought of before. I'm not planning on passing just yet. I've got some more stuff to do. So, but in terms of accidents, obviously are somewhat different. It's for, when we choose to say, okay, well, I feel like I've done what I came here for. It was just, okay, so you feel fulfilled and say, okay, like, to get to that stage in life where just, that's okay, I've passed on the knowledge that I wanted. I've, I mean, again, it's sort of not me, but to be in that space of saying, because I'm not bringing that in at all. It's just for when people are at the stage when they are ready. I'll say it that way. and then yes, to be happy and to discuss that and say that to people around you and express how you feel. But whether it can, the actual next part of it, the burial or whatever else is requested, can be done in the private is different. It may be different in different countries depending on the actual land that is going to be used. I don't know. It's because there's a whole idea of being consecrated land for burials, you know, in churchyards. So yes, big topic. It's a big topic. But I mean, that's the practical side of it. But just being open to talking about dying, which I think, you know, this topic is helping. You know, sort of these ideas of assisted dying, and it's maybe it'll get more people thinking about that. So in the same way as the last 5 years have got people thinking very differently about what makes them ill, to, you know, paraphrase the book, it's, you know, it's helped us think about all other aspects of our lives, you know, whether it's to do with the law, whether it's to do with the money, whether education, and why not think about it in the concept of, well, let's think about the, you know, what happens when we're ready to transition to move into somewhere else. And in terms of like these prognoses, and again, be careful, the idea that somebody is terminal is an educated guess, because there are cases. Have you? Well, I don't know. I'm assuming that you have, but have you heard of Anita Muljani? She had
Just barely.
yes, and she had a near-death experience. I mean, she pretty much was riddled. But, you know, her body was riddled, and she was not long for, you know, for here. And she had a near-death experience and had a resolution of certain issues that she was having, and came back and recovered and is still alive, telling her story. I mean, that's a very condensed version. There's so much more to it. The point is that she was given the terminal label, and this is where my problem is with the situation, because that's where it's starting in England, and we know that once the gates are open, it can then move into where it is in Canada, which is the person doesn't have to have a terminal diagnosis. It doesn't have to be terminal. They can just have a serious condition.
Exactly.
You know, they don't have to have the timing thing. And, you know, again, that's why I mentioned it in the article about the nocebo effect, that people literally can be given that label, you know, the terminal can be used, and they can follow instructions, shall we say, and they can do, so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the doctors think they're correct, and at the same time they are correct, but they have helped instigate it, because again, as I quote, if I can, we've got some time, haven't we? I think I'll be able to read this. That's from the article that I quote in my article by Dr. Lisa Rankin, who she wrote a book called Mind Over Medicine. And part of that article, where she's talking about the nocebo effect, under the subtitle, When You Think You're Going to Die, in another study, so this again is a study, it's just not just her opinion, patients about to undergo surgery who were, she's put in inverted commas, convinced of their impending death, were compared to another group of patients who were merely, and again inverted commas, unusually apprehensive about death. While the apprehensive bunch fared pretty well, those who were convinced they were going to die usually did. And that's where the power of the mind, the ideas, our belief systems, our how much we have given our power away to somebody else, to these external I was going to say authorities, I mean the perceived authorities, and yes, she actually refers to medical hexing. Yes, I mean this, and it goes back to, I mean, people have known about this for a long time, and the idea of voodoo death. It was an article by Walter Cannon written in the 1940s. He went to these, went to visit indigenous cultures. He called them primitive, but of course they had different ideas. But the point is that they could be cursed, or the bone pointing, and the people would then die if they were given a curse that they're going to go and die. They would, because we can manifest those situations in our body, because we just literally, because of the belief system, because we are totally convinced that that is what is going to happen.
Right on. One of the topics, we are coming down towards the end of the interview, but if you have a few more minutes, I do as well. And you've brought it up, but we haven't gone into detail just about how mental illness made its way onto that list of it doesn't need to be terminal anymore, and now it could even just be a disease of the mind. And that seems to me to be extremely slippery. Isn't one of the conditions of the MA program?
No,
Okay.
that actually is interesting. In this is some of the information I found for the situation in Canada, is that the illness does not need to be terminal, but it's described as a person needs to have a grievous and irremediable medical condition. So it's having a serious illness, disease, or disability, brackets, excluding a mental disorder, until March the 17th, 2027. So that's...
So it's in the books.
That's going to be revisited in 2027.
There you go.
So it's not off the cards. It is not included at the moment, but there is a possibility that it will be reviewed, revisited. They'll come back to that. So there's a possibility that it may well be brought in, the mental illness, which of course, and mental disorders are not included in this, but dementia, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's are not considered mental disorders. Even though when I was looking at these conditions or these labels, they are considered mental disorders. But again, it depends on the context. So they can choose, well, it is for this and it's not for that. So again, talk about confusing for people. But at least that's good, because at the moment, as you say, mental disorders aren't included.
Well, even to consider it is really interesting, because informed consent, where is that when somebody's not in their right mind? If you have a mental disorder to that degree that you would warrant assistance dying, then who's supposed to make that decision? Who's in their right mind? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you're looking at it. Would a power of attorney make that decision for you? Like, they're in really murky waters there. And I mean, the mental illness, I'm not wanting to diminish it or make it like it isn't real, but in some ways it is infinitely easier to deal with than something that has become physical. Now, chances are you've got both situations, right? When the mind is sick, the body is sick, and it works both ways. I know many people who've done, only detox work, and they have cured depressions, and they have cured things that a doctor would have said you need some medication for that, or that'll always be the case, which is so common. Like, who hasn't been told by a doctor that when they put you on something, you may need this for the rest of your life, right? So there's absolutely no trajectory on healing. But so this is interesting. Thank you for your research. I tend to just like hear and absorb things, and so it's good to know they're only considering that. But even that it would be on the table, to me, is just so. They must be up all night long inventing all of this weirdness.
Yes, I mean that is the concern of where the informed consent comes from, which of course does open up the huge can of worms, because if they are considered to have a mental disorder, how can they have the capacity to make that decision? And of course that just opens the door to so many other possibilities and so many other potential abuses, because that's one of the concerns that people say, well, there are two arguments. Well, I'm not saying they're my arguments. The two general arguments are, well, it's people have the right to determine, self-determination, so they have the right to make choices for their own lives. So, okay, if they've got the right information, is my proviso on that. And the other one is whether this could be open to abuse by people who, well, all sorts of, I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities of how the assisted dying could be abused, or the assisted suicide, because we know there are people who may not be operating from the heart, shall we say, from a place of compassion, that could then gaslight somebody into thinking that they need to go down that route for whatever reason. So there's I mean, that's just, one
Yeah.
of possible abuses. And again, within the actual medical system, these doctors can think it's the right thing because that's their specialty and that's what they see, because they've put that into place, because that's what they've told people then follow the instructions, and so they think they're right, and they say, well, this is what I see in most cases, because so more, my preference would be that more people are seeing things, thinking about things, and asking questions. Let's start asking these people questions.
Yeah.
Ask them to explain things to us. I mean, that's if people, anybody who does. I'm not saying people should or shouldn't, it is just, if you're in that situation, ask them questions, as many as possible, go with a whole list of questions. And when they give you an answer, keep questioning. Get them to explain to you what's going on. And in his book, Confessions of a Medical Heretic, Dr. Robert Mendelsohn, I wrote it in the 60s, some 80s, I can't remember now when that book was written. I mean, or maybe it's the 60s, because I think he died in the 80s. He was saying, he called the modern medicine the church. Yeah, he called it the church of modern medicine. And he said, because if you question them long enough, you'll soon reach the chasm of faith, where they just say, well, trust me, I'm a doctor, or something to that effect, because they don't have all the information to be able to provide you with the full information to make an informed decision. So informed consent is not what people have. They are not given the option for informed consent. And I think that's a lot of what drove my incentive to write the article, to say, look, no, there's a lot more information that people aren't receiving. So
Right. There you go. Well,
slippery slopes.
lots of slippery slopes and a big subject, and you did very well with it. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to once again share a link to Don's Substack. Is there anything else that you'd like to let people know about what's coming up? By the way, are you at an Acapulco this year? Did I see that?
No,
Okay.
no.
Yeah.
I was at Liverpool, which is the Serbia version in Europe. So I think there's a good chance I'll be back there.
Nice.
There's hopefully Confluence in May. So I don't know if we'll end up meeting up at some place at one of these events at some time. It would be good.
Yeah, Confluence was a little on my radar, so it could happen.
That'll be good. Yeah, no, various talks and interviews and things being set up. There's a few things in the pipeline, and early stages of production, shall we say. So yeah, I continue writing for my Substack, and as I say, I think there might be some more to write on that topic, because again, this the whole ethics side of it, that's a big topic, and how people say it's not right to take your own life. I mean, that's the religious side. So yes, I shall be continuing to write. So yes, and thank you for helping me share the information and being open to talking about it, even though, and hopefully people have been able to understand our codes. I don't
I
think they've
think
been
so.
too good. Yeah.
No, we're all in good company here. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
put up your hand if you need any definitions.
Yeah, it would be nice if we could find a way to spread this beyond the people who are the more regular viewers and listeners, to help share this with other people so that they have the information so they can make informed decisions.
Right. Yeah, that's why I would invite people that are around to share this out and to open up with the conversations and have them long before you're facing intense decisions. Just make slowly drip it into your life and see what it brings up in you. And could you uh, meet that rather than try to get away from it and pretend it's not going to happen somehow in one way or another. So yeah, brilliant. I'm glad you picked the subject and gave me the chance to do this. Um, I just wanted to let people know that this could be the last stream of the year. I'm not sure. There might be more, but I'm pretty spontaneous with it. But what I'm up to right now is a New Year offering of archetype readings, so people could find out where in the hero's journey they are, where they're struggling, where they have likely left parts of themselves behind on the journey, where they're headed. Because if you don't have clear direction, then it doesn't matter how much energy you have. And the lack of direction itself can be something that's very draining, even if you've got the life energy, but chances are it sucks the life out of you. So I don't do this very often. This is once a year at best I'm going to be doing this, because I'm not like a kind of mystical medium or anything like that. But it's very pragmatic, because it's about learning to read the patterns that already exist in the conscious and the unconscious, so that you can start to master this and not be always at the mercy of the circumstances, but you can choose a path that is really purposed for you. And in a little bit of time learning about yourself and knowing yourself, this is the power that we all lack. If we knew ourselves, then other people couldn't come along and sway us or take advantage of us in nearly the same way. So this is something that you can take me up on in the next 4 to 6 weeks, as long as spots are open, which I have a limited number for. And if anybody would like to check that out, you can visit the link that I put in the chat here, and I will drop it in the show notes because I haven't done that yet. And at the door, Merry Christmas to you for anyone who's celebrating, and to you and your family. Dawn, if you're going to be having any of those celebrations or quiet time, for me, it's mostly quiet time.
Quiet time.
That's awesome.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
really good.
Nice.
Really good. And just so you know, also my YouTube channel is almost at 1,000 subscribers. So if you're here listening and you haven't subbed yet and you want to do that, or invite any of your friends to, I'm actually not going to monetize this channel, but I thought it would be fun to get to 1,000 anyway. And so I think that's it for today. Merry Christmas to everyone, since I won't see you before Christmas, and probably something in the week between Christmas and New Year's. Something will come up, and maybe I'll even jump on my own. But by the way, I have heard from a few people. They say that they would like to hear more from me in my videos. And how you can do that is come in the House of Free Will as a member. I do a video every single week on Mondays. I call it snippet videos. Pick a topic that is of interest to me or has been requested in the membership, and go deep into that. It's slowly becoming a nice mass of videos, and maybe a book, because so much of how I think and feel and see and teach is in those videos. So if you want more of me, if that's the case, then the House of Free Will is a good place to find that, and you can find a link in the notes below. So I'm going to play us out with my son again. I don't know the names of these pieces, but let me just make sure this is queued up. Thank you once again, Dawn, for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure. You are a rock star in your world, and I'm always cheering for you. So appreciate everything that you do.
I appreciate everything you do too, Beth. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me as well. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Bye, everyone.